It's going to be only the fourth time in history that this has happened. Georgia heading to Jacksonville to take on the Gators as the number one team in the country. The AP poll out today. Let's just take a real quick look at it. Georgia off this week after really just a turbulent weekend of college football. North Carolina and Penn State both lost in the top 10. Washington, if you missed the Washington game, you're probably not the only one. But boy, they deserved to lose and didn't. And then, of course, Texas and Oklahoma. Oklahoma really escaped more than Texas, I would say. But, boy, that was nuts. So, anyway, Georgia is getting gained on by Michigan. Not as much as I thought it would be. I thought it was not out of the realm of possibility that Michigan grabbed the number one spot this week. I think voters are penalizing Georgia for not being as good as they want them to be, and for Michigan not playing anybody. I mean, we're still at that point here. Ohio State's has played two legitimate games. I would say maybe even more than that. I would say Michigan, their most complicated game was against UNLV earlier in the year. UNLV is 6-1, I believe, after surviving themselves last night. But it'll only be the fourth time in history that Georgia goes to Jacksonville as the number one team in the country. Now, this is by my math. So it was not 1980, not 1981, or 1982. All those years, Georgia was not number one when they took on the Gators down there in Jacksonville. So this is not going to be something that's, very commonly happened. I mean, in 1980, people forget Georgia's number 2 going into that game. They had beaten South Carolina on what people thought was kind of the game of the season. No, it turned out to be Florida. That was the game that everybody turned around and paid attention to. That was George Rogers against Herschel Walker in Sanford Stadium on ABC back in the day when games were not on national television. They certainly weren't on every single week, the Dogs. But anyway, they went out to go into Jacksonville as the number 2 team in the country. It was after that win that they became number 1 and went on to win the national championship, obviously. In 1981, they lost to Clemson in the second or third week of the season. And then in 82, they were not a number 1 team when they played Florida. They were number 3. By the time they played Auburn a week later, they were the number 1 team in the country, surviving that game, 19-14 win. Look at the sugar falling from the sky. So I think for me, heading into this thing, Georgia, when you look at the landscape of college football, for me right now, it's Georgia and Michigan. And I think right after that, you've probably got Ohio State and Florida State. And I think there's a gap between Michigan and Georgia, and then there's a gap between Ohio State and Florida State. And between Michigan, Ohio State, and Florida State, as well as Georgia. That foursome, it's really 2 at the top, 2 right after that. And, of course, 2 of them will play one another. And then I cannot really say, after surviving a 1-6 team, that I would put Washington in the same category as Florida State and Ohio State. Yeah, I just don't think you can do that. I mean, Ohio State survived at Notre Dame. Notre Dame's good. I mean, Notre Dame is a good team. I mean, clearly, Florida State's a good team too. They're very wishy-washy at times. They were losing to Duke late in that game in the fourth quarter, I believe. Some of this is going off memory. But anyway, the rest of let's just go backwards from 25. Florida was number 26. They did not get ranked. But anyway, James Madison at 24. Somehow USC is still ranked. They should not be ranked. I'm just going to say that right now. UCLA at 23. Tulane, the team that beat UCLA last year at the Cotton Bowl, they are ranked 22nd. Tennessee's going to have to hold on to stay ranked when Georgia comes to town. They've got Kentucky this coming week. I mean, it's going to be a fight for UT. But anyway, Tennessee's at 21, Duke at 20, Air Force undefeated at 19, Louisville at 18. That bad loss. I mean, ACC just. And then, North Carolina, they had a horrible loss. Missouri at 16. I think that's probably about where they should be. LSU at 15. LSU's playing better. Notre Dame at 14. Utah at 13. Ole Miss at 12. So Georgia's going to play number 21, 16, and 12 in these next few weeks. I kind of thought Florida might be ranked, but they're not. You can't kind of shake some of the stuff that happened at the beginning of the season. With that loss to Utah and just the way they were decimated by Kentucky. Oregon State at 11. Penn State at 10 still. I guess everyone doesn't agree with James Franklin that we may have seen the best 2 teams in the country. Maybe the 2 of the top 15 teams. Hold on, Penn State. Your season's not over yet. And I don't mean that good or bad. I'm just saying Alabama back in the top 10 at 9, Oregon at 8, Texas at 7. Man, Texas and Oklahoma, that was rough. 6 for Oklahoma. Texas and Oklahoma both played bad. And I've seen this a few times now with Texas to the degree that I just don't know if you can trust them very much anymore. I mean, the way that they played at times this season, like against Alabama, was great. I mean, they were barely beating Wyoming at home the week after. I mean, they were in real trouble, and they exploded in the fourth quarter. But there's a lot of games now where, even against Rice, I think that game was a little tighter than the 27 points may have indicated. No, it was not. They absolutely blitzed Rice. They were up 16-3 at the half, and I think sometimes people, I don't think that's a real concern. But that the Wyoming score where they were tied in the fourth quarter, I mean, that's bad. And Wyoming's actually not that bad, but it's been a little bit, shakier from Texas lately. And then UW, that was probably, of the top teams, Washington probably deserved to lose more than anybody. I mean, they were losing the whole night. Oklahoma was not necessarily losing. They were just having to hold on. And, that game for Oklahoma yesterday against UCF, I mean, UCF, it looked like they were going to win that game for a while. I mean, they were up 21-17 into the fourth quarter. And, to Oklahoma's credit, and I thought they'd win the whole time, I have to say, they punched out an 8-point lead, but then they let, UCF march the field on you. This weekend was a lot of suspect football if your name wasn't Michigan or Florida State. I mean, Alabama had a bad first half. Penn State lost. Oregon looked sloppy. Texas, Oklahoma, Washington, poor performances. Florida State was losing to Duke in the fourth quarter. I mean, this was the weekend not to play. I'm just going to say, as a ranked team, this was the weekend not to play if you are a highly ranked team, because it was just bad out there. It was just bad out there. I mean, you can only play like that so many times and not lose. Now, I think we know, because of the way that Georgia fans are, we hear that every single Sunday. Whether they've blown somebody out or not, there's always some criticism to be had if you were a Georgia fan. And that's fine. It's just what it is. But, Florida State going into the fourth quarter was losing to Duke. I mean, they were losing 20-17, and the quarterback goes out. Here comes Florida State. Touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. Now that's why Florida State's dangerous. They are dangerous. They can win the national championship. Michigan, Georgia. I think Ohio State has the toughness to do it. The quarterback is a bit of a problem for me there. I mean, Florida State quarterback, I mean, I'm not overly worried about him. He does some stuff sometimes that I'm not super thrilled with. But, I mean, 3 touchdowns, and he scored one and then threw one in the fourth quarter to really zoom them out to win that game against Duke. Carson Beck has proven what he can do. J.J. McCarthy. Michael Penix, he was not good yesterday. So there was a lot of not very impressive stuff yesterday. Penix was 27-42, 2 interceptions. I mean, he just didn't look good. He was inaccurate. And you got to fight through those situations. But I'm here to tell y'all, Washington, if you think you're going to go for 13 yards rushing in the college football playoff, you're going to get your ass handed to you by somebody. Now, I think UW will be there, but I don't know. I mean, Utah's still hanging around. USC is of no concern at this stage. But, we're getting down to nitty-gritty time here. Washington has Stanford, a team that has proven it can hang in there. USC, Utah, number 11 Oregon State, and then Washington State. I do not think that Washington will necessarily lose any of those games, but that's a tough stretch. That's a tough stretch of in Los Angeles versus Utah, and then in Corvallis. I mean, you could lose any of those 3 games. You totally could lose those games. For Georgia, look, they've not been in this spot a lot. I just went through it. They were the number 1 team in the country, and they were not number 1 in the team in the AP poll in 2017 when they went down there and throttled Florida. But in 21 and 22 and 42, and there was another one, I can't remember when it was. It might have been, there was another time that Georgia went down there as the number 1 team. Well, now, excuse me, the 4th time. So, the last 3 years, Georgia's gone to Jacksonville, and it's not always been, a total blowout. In 21, Florida stuck in there for a while, and then it just collapsed in the right before the break. So this is a really big moment for Georgia. It's a big moment for the Gators. I mean, the winner of this game controls their own destiny in the East. Florida already has a loss, obviously, to Kentucky, but they've got to win over Tennessee, a team now who also has 2 losses, if I'm not mistaken, the Vols in league play. Yeah, they do, because they lost to Florida and Alabama. They still have to play Missouri. They still have to play Georgia. I mean, Tennessee's got it's tough for Tennessee for sure, but it's just tough in this league. That's just all there is to it. If you're playing in the SEC, you're gonna have a really rough run. Yeah, Tennessee still has Kentucky, Missouri, and the Dogs. Georgia still has Florida, Missouri, Ole Miss, and Tennessee on the road. Of course, they have Georgia Tech to end the season. The Jackets with a complete and utter collapse at Mark Rick Field, excuse me, on Saturday. That's twice this season that some really bad stuff has happened at Mark Rick Field, and we're just gonna have to see what happens at the end of the Georgia Tech season. You don't want to go 3 years in a row with a new coach. And I don't think that's going to happen, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. And we're just going to have to see. But the Dogs need to go down to Jacksonville and play well. I think they will. I do. I might be naive. I don't know. But Florida's been very up and down this season. I don't know that Georgia's been as up and down. They just not has been as up as much as you want. But they're heading Jacksonville as the number 1 team in the country.